All right. We're here at conversation number 60. We will be talking today first about Nick Fuentes' journeys and travels around the interwebs, I guess, podcast circuit. Do you
When is
want to?
when is Nick joining us? Is he going to be on in a
You
minute?
know
Or?
what? No. That's we at the conversation do not believe in platforming him. You know what? Like, no, if he wanted to join, he could join. You know what I'm saying? Like, actually, like, real talk. Like, I mean, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. So, he's like out there. Uh, so, I mean, should I just like tell the listeners who Nick Fuentes is?
Probably would be good. Yeah, as background.
Yeah. So Nick Fuentes is a.
Yeah,
Uh, so basically, he is like, how old is he now? I think
he's
he's
27, so
yes, he's 20.
he's young. He even younger than Charlie Kirk, who seemed like
Yeah.
not
So
possible.
Fuentes has basically been on the scene since 2016 or so. He really got on a lot of people's radar, probably like arguably my radar, maybe a little bit earlier, but he was like associated in some way with Unite the Right in Charlottesville, I think 2018. Uh, I think he was doing his Weird America First TV show or like YouTube show earlier, and then he's continued to do it. So he does these long monologues where he talks for like a couple hours every night, and he's been doing this for a decade now. And he went to Boston University when he was a and he was a freshman there in 2016. But he dropped out partly because on controversies on campus and in the Boston area because he's a big MAGA supporter at the time. And over the years he's had multiple evolutions, but he's kind of created something called a Groyper army around him. These followers, usually they're anti-feminist, anti-Semitic, often somewhat white nationalist as he is, despite him being he himself, his father is half Mexican, I believe,
Yeah,
and I don't know if he's half or full Mexican, but the issue is like not the issue. Nick is about 19% non-European in ancestry, so
right. He's
he
posted
is.
his 23andMe, so yeah.
Yeah, so he's about 19. So he's about 18% indigenous and about 1% African, which that is not a surprising amount for someone that had a mestizo uh, grand, well, paternal grandfather. His paternal grandfather is clearly a mestizo, right? Was a mixed race Mexican. But anyway, he is a white nationalist. He lives in the Chicago area. He's been on the scene for a decade now, so almost a decade, and so his biography is pretty well known. He has kind of a narrative how he was, unpersoned by the right and attacked for his views, especially his skepticism of Israel and his airing of the Jewish question. And there's just a huge track record of things he's said over the years. Some of them, having to deal with, you know, the Holocaust and other weird things and just jokes and now he's kind of doing the circuit of higher profile shows. So he was I first thought that he was on Glenn Greenwald, his show. So I was like, okay, that's weird because Glenn Greenwald is moderately mainstream figure. Then he was on Red Scare with Dasha and Nick
Yeah,
Fuentes, or not Dasha and Anna Kachian.
right.
And I listened to it. Like, it was pretty friendly. And I've seen Nick. He was on years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago. He was on some show on the Blaze with Sydney Watson and that retarded guy. Uh, he like has a really retarded face too, but he says a lot of retarded things. He's in Dallas. He got fired from the Blaze. I need to find now. I need to find this because I want to name him. Name the retard. You know. You Are Here was the podcast, and it was with Elijah Schaefer, right? So this Elijah Schaefer guy, I have to say, like unrelated. People say, "Oh, Nick Fuentes is smart," even though he's, racist and anti-Semitic. He's kind of got some talent. He's brilliant. Elijah Schaefer's retarded, and he kind of looks retarded, but he's got like kind of the same views, but as a retard.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not. I kind of met him in real life. He's kind of a big dude. He'd probably like come after me, but like just like seriously, just look up Elijah Schaefer, slightly offensive, and you can just like see the face is just like definitely like I don't know if we're cracking triple digits here, And Elijah Schaefer has gotten in trouble for you can say a lot of things about Nick, but he's does this whole Volcel lifestyle and avoids women Elisha Schaefer has gotten in trouble with sexual harassment with women and men. So, uh,
Right. All right.
he's a retard with strong and Catholic appetites. But anyway, Nick Fuentes,
Yeah. All right. Catholic in the
the lowercase c.
universal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Lowercase
he
c.
has like. I mean, seriously, dude. Okay, I just gotta say, you're like a right wing shock jock guy, and like you're Christian, and like you're talking about how your Mormon cousins are going to hell because they're not Christian and all this stuff, and then like a big sexual harassment scandal comes out, and it turns out that like I don't know what he was exactly doing, but it's like he was like, "Oh, it's not gay. I'm just having fun, man. I'm just joking."
Yeah.
I don't know, man. But anyway,
I will say when you said before we started recording that you wanted to talk about Nick Fuentes' appearance on Tucker, I didn't realize it was going to devolve into something about like this Elijah Schaefer guy who I've never really heard of, and all his crimes and shortcomings alleged, perhaps.
so Nick has not like committed like too many crimes. In fact, he was almost assassinated like a couple months
Yes,
ago.
yeah, it
So
does. He talked about that on the Tucker show, which was I knew I had heard stuff about that, but I don't think I had heard
yeah,
all of the details. Like I didn't know that the guy had previously killed people, or that he had, I guess, a shootout with the cops or something.
yeah.
So, I mean that's pretty intense, I would say. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess like let me just say the whole Tucker interview was interesting because it was pretty cordial. In fact, like in a lot of it, Tucker was prompting him in a way that wasn't confrontational at all. It was
right.
kind of like pretty like kind of like leading him to like explain his life, explain his story, his point of view. Now, I actually don't like the type of podcast where it's like they're like, oh, this is 60 minutes, or like, this is,
Right.
confrontational, because it's like there's no insight out of that. You don't really get to know the person because like they're really defensive, and it's just kind of like tense back and forth. It might go full Katie Porter on them. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's just like it's not. You're not going to get the cooperation. On the other hand, I know you watched it. I watched it. I mean, I got the sense that Tucker was enjoying himself. So
Yeah. I mean, it was a little odd. Not only because of Nick's views and whatever, um, but they had Tucker and Nick had previously been beefing, including quite recently. Tucker had noted, I think accurately, that Nick was at the Capitol on January 6th, and I believe is on video telling people to go into the Capitol. Suggested that, so Tucker said that maybe suggested that Nick was some sort of Fed or whatever, and Nick, even just recently, as like a month ago or something, was suggesting that Tucker was being paid by the Russian government, and other stuff. And so, that that was seemed like that was just all water under the bridge. It didn't even really, I mean, it barely came up. And Tucker is not adverse to hostile interviews. People, it
Ted
seems like
Cruz.
a long time ago but when Tucker first got his show, I think it was 2017. Like like his original draw on the show was that, unlike most cable news shows, the host will have on guests who agree with them, and then it'll just go back and forth. And Tucker would have on people who disagreed with him, and they would go at it, right? And he that's continued, I would say, even now. I mean, many of his interviews on his podcast are friendly, but he does like he interviewed Ted Cruz. That was a very contentious interview. He's interviewed Piers Morgan, other people where he's not afraid necessarily to kind of go after people. Um,
Yeah, well, so Tucker does this thing. He does this thing with his face. He does this thing with his face.
Right. Yes. Tucker face. Yeah.
He didn't do that very much.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
because he does that when Ted Cruz would be talking, he'd be like,
Right. Right. Right.
and like with like Nick, he was just like, like considering. So,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think people are like a little, they feel a little sus because the thing is like Fuentes is, he's putting his best foot forward, but like, I mean, he has like, you know, like he, like he, kind of like demonic laughing about like Holocaust and stuff. I mean, that's
Sure.
just part
I
of his
mean, there's a lot
shtick.
of yeah. There's a lot of stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, Nick. I can't. So I can't say that I am like deeply immersed in Nick Fuentes's oeuvre or whatever, but I have seen various clips. I've seen some podcast appearances or whatnot, and he gives me a little bit of a vibe of like a 1990s era shock jock, radio jock, like someone like
Yeah.
Howard Stern. There's some differences, obviously. Nick is much. I mean, he's much more political. The shock jocks, while they would do political stuff, that wasn't what they were going after. And there's other stuff like that. The the taboo subjects have kind of changed. But back in the '90s, it was like a lot of crude sex stuff, and although there was some race stuff too back then, which people don't
Yeah.
kind of memory hold or whatever. But like, they would say the N word or do other stuff like that. But now if you think of like what are the social taboos that will annoy people, if in the 90s it was like talking about sex in vulgar terms and making fun of religion or whatever. Now it's like joking about the Holocaust or other stuff like that. So I it's not a perfect analogy, but I do think that's kind of part of the appeal. Probably a similar demographic listened to, but like who was big fans of Howard Stern? It was probably young men.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably that's Nick's.
I remember the first time I saw Howard Stern. I saw him on the Tonight Show. I think it was like 1991 or 92, and he was like so incredible. No, it was on Letterman. He was on Letterman a fair amount.
Yeah,
The first time I think he was on Jay Leno's show in the 90s, because finally had him on if he got big enough. He was being a total. He was being kind of an asshole, saying like, Arsenio Hall's a punk ass bitch and all this stuff, and Jay was like, and then like there was one scene where apparently like during the musical presentation, Howard brought on two women to kiss, and like this is the 1990s, and you couldn't like show that really, and so
right.
like apparently Jay gets up, he's like, turn the cameras. They're like switching, the cameras are moving away. But that's the kind of like antics that Howard Stern was up to, and like I, as a teenage boy, thought it was really funny, kind of,
Right.
because you never knew what he was going to do. And with Nick Fuentes, it's not what he's going to do; it's what he's going to say.
Correct. Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, but I did say this, I think, in like a group chat that we're in. I listened to probably like half the Anna and Dasho interview, and then I listened to like 3/4 of the Tucker one. I listened to the whole interview with Glenn Greenwald actually because that was shorter.
Yeah.
Uh, the Glenn Greenwald I listened to, like, why is Glenn Greenwald talking to him? So I said something when he went on Red Scare. I'm like, does he have a publicist? Like, what's going on here?
Clearly, I mean, I don't know if he formally has a publicist, but he's clearly making some sort of bid for, if not mainstream acceptability, like mainstream conservative acceptability, because he's been doing a lot of these shows. And then, while he hasn't really, I would not, it's not right to say that he's moderated his views at all, but he has done, like, he condemned the Charlie Kirk assassination, even though they had been big enemies. He's done some like monologues or whatever about speaking out against Candace Owens and other people who want to say that Israel killed Charlie Kirk or whatnot.
Yeah,
So he's trying to like distinguish himself somewhat from those other more fringe figures. And so you have to assume that he sees, now that Kirk is dead. There's like an audience out there that's maybe up for grabs in his view, and the world has kind of moved in his direction, or the conservative movement has moved in his direction on stuff like Israel or whatever. And so maybe he can become, not like he's going to be invited on, you know, the network news or something, but he could become, main.
Influencer, a real influencer.
Yeah. And I don't know if that actually is going to work, to be honest. I think there's probably too much baggage there, I would say, on a bunch of different stuff. But it does, I think, it speaks to maybe kind of like some broader trends that it's even vaguely a little possible. I was thinking earlier today, so I'm 47 years old, and I think up until the time I turned 40, I can really only think of one case in which anyone said anything to me that you might consider anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
It just was not, and that even that was like pretty mild, right?
Yes.
So it just was not like, and I ran in a lot of conservative circles. I ran in a lot of religious circles, but also, secular, whatever. Talked a lot, interacted with lots of different people.
Libertarians.
It just did, like, the issue did not really come up. And to the extent that it did come up, like, everyone was pretty pro the Jews,
Yeah.
Like, people kind of liked Israel. They kind of like, if they had feelings about the Jews, they were positive. And it does seem like, over the past 5, 6, however many years, that stuff is still kind of fringe, but it's not like, it's definitely increased, right? People are, and why that is, there's like all sorts of different theories you could come up with why it is. But I think I was probably in denial about it for a little while because it seemed so
marginal.
Yeah, well, it seemed marginal and like kind of, like anti-Semitism is something of like, stupid nobodies, right? Want to talk about, cranks or whatever.
Yeah. It's like low human capital stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it like, again, I don't want to overstate the extent of it, but it does seem like it is kind of blown up and become, more mainstream. Let's say, like, it's not mainstream, but it's like closer to mainstream adjacent than certainly it was, when I was growing up. I don't know if you have similar experiences or not, but
my family is like Muslim, and so like obviously we knew Muslim people from the third world, and like they had like pretty third worldist like anti-Semitic, not like European style anti-Semitic, but it was like, oh, Jews just control everything, and you can't like speak against them, and they're stingy, the usual things. It was very like unsophisticated, but stuff that you hear a little bit from Europeans. I have to say, Europeans, you would hear like more stuff about how Jews pretty much control America, and you can't speak against them. Whereas I think like white Americans in particular were very philo-Semitic is a term, So I think that I think you're correct. I've heard Jews themselves, because they're, believe it or not, you can't tell everybody is a Jew. There are some people, clearly a Jew. Like there are people. So I was in New York and I gave a talk recently. I don't know if it's kind of funny though. I gave a talk recently at Rain, successor to Sovereign House, and there's a guy that I meet in New York every now and then. He has like tightly curled, very dark brown hair, and he has like a prominent nose. He's about like 5'6", and he wears like a button-up shirt, but he like unbuttons the top through it. He's like quite hirsute, and he also has a necklace with a Star of David. And I'm just like, the first time I met him, I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, bro. You just look You look like like
You
an
look like, yeah,
anti-Semitic caricature,
right,
you know?
right, right.
And he's like, yeah, people have told me that they're kind of uncomfortable because I look like, like the caricature of like what like some anti-Semite would draw of a Jew. He's a very Jewish looking guy, you know?
It seems like he's leading into it too, but
Yeah, yeah, he's leading into it with the Star of David
yeah,
and everything.
right,
But
yeah,
with a gold necklace. Okay, there's that guy, but then there's other people you just like have no idea. Like some of these are half Jewish people who identify as
sure.
Jewish, whatever. The details do not matter. But I was in DC and I was like, I mean, I guess I can say because there's you won't be able to identify. The person doesn't have a clearly Jewish name.
Mhm.
Like so, and sometimes you don't know how people are Jewish. Like Sean McGuire is very very like Jewish. He talks about being pro-Israel and Zionist. His name is Sean McGuire.
Right,
Okay, like
right,
it's like guys should just be out. Like at least Matt Iglesias will say like my paternal grandfather is Cuban and his parents were from Galicia.
right,
That's why I have the name Iglesias. But actually, three out of four of my grandparents are Eastern European Jews, and I grew up in New
right,
York City. So he's
right,
basically a Jewish guy, right? At least he tells you that. Sean McGuire has never said, "Oh, my dad was Irish and my mom was Jewish American, but I was raised Jewish, even though I somehow was given the name Sean." Whatever.
right,
Um,
right,
I just want to say that there's people out there where you don't know that they're Jewish, and so this is a guy. I think actually both his parents are Jewish, but like tall, like whatever. I'm just saying, not looking like the guy I described earlier,
sure.
and his name was not super Jewish. Probably it was anglicized or whatever. But apparently, he works in Trump administration, and periodically people would just like talk about how they don't like the Jews to him. And like
Right,
he
right,
usually doesn't say anything because it's like awkward, and then later they find out that he is Jewish and they'll apologize to him. Sorry, but he's like,
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but like you don't like the Jews, like you just like admitted that to me. It's like, what do you have to apologize for? Like these are your views. I guess they apologized and they were like, well, we wouldn't have said it in front of you.
Yeah, well, and also, I wonder. I mean, maybe this is still my denial coming out, but sometimes I do wonder when people say stuff like that, like how seriously do they actually mean it?
Yeah,
You know, because I think some people like
it's part of the base ritual.
correct, yes, which Richard Hanani had talked about, and yeah, so some of this, some of this may have like, you know, if someone says they don't like the Jews or whatever, that could be that they really don't like the Jews, but it also could be like they know that's something that they're not. It's edgy. They're not supposed to say it. Like some of these views, people adopt them precisely because, um, they're the things that you're not supposed to believe according to mainstream liberal institutions or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's to violate a taboo.
Correct. Yeah, to violate a taboo, and it can be hard, I think, to distinguish, you know, like to like separate out those motivations. And of course, you could start over here and end up over here. Um, uh, so it's difficult. It's difficult to suss out. But I do think that like some of that, because like a lot of things, like one thing that I have also experienced, which I'm sure you have too, is the Jewish anti-Semite, right?
Yes.
Or like if you have someone who says, "Oh, I like the Jews are awful" or whatever. Uh, I'm like not all the time, maybe not even most of the time, but a good chunk of the time, the person who's saying that to
Yeah.
you is themselves Jewish or
Yeah.
more often half Jewish. And so it's just like a little weird. It's sort of like they have their own, um, I guess like there's the N-word pass where like black people are allowed to say the N-word or whatever. And
Yeah.
I don't know,
Nuclear. I said it.
right? Yes, exactly. Um, but maybe if you're Jewish, like you're a little bit more comfortable making a Holocaust joke. I don't know what it is, but I have noticed.
Yeah, I mean there's a whole like morbid Jewish Holocaust related humor. That's true,
Right.
but a lot of that is like out of like the Yiddish theater. You know what I'm saying. That's a particular type of humor.
Sure.
Um, I do. So yeah, I think in terms of the anti-Semitism, like that has changed. Let me say, and Nick Fuentes in his interview with Tucker brought this up, and this has come up elsewhere. I do think the pro-Israel faction in American politics kind of became a victim of its own success. In say our generation, we're Generation X. Like
Right.
in our generation, I think it was kind of like the boomers kind of set the stage, after the 67 war, and then the Yom Kippur War. And then there was like 30 years of really strong bipartisan consensus, really right up until the Obama administration. And even then, it still wasn't like totally out. It was kind of like Obama was like, say, like maybe like Constantine before he became public about his Christianity. Like you could tell Obama was not the most pro-Jewish president, or pro-Israeli president. But
Right.
his administration was pretty pro-Israel. Biden was his vice president, et cetera, et cetera. So there's only so much he could do. And to be fair, H.W. Bush, George W. Bush's father, his administration was actually like pretty tough on Israel compared to Reagan before and Clinton after. Uh, you know,
Correct. Yes.
so
Right.
I mean, but again, like that's measured on a curve. To be fair, it's measured on a curve. But my only point is like saying anything against Israel or the American-Israel relationship would often, it would turn you into a Buchanan, kind of a pariah, and
Mhm.
Buchanan only lasted as long as he could because he had such deep roots in Washington, and actually he's apparently a very nice person. And knock on wood, he's still with us, but he's I think we mentioned he's very ill right now. But anyway, my only point is like you don't speak against Israel for a long time in the American political landscape, and so there was quote unquote pent up demand, I think, for a more Zionist skeptical, more Israel skeptical position. Um, but what happens when you have pent up demands is sometimes it explodes and is like out of control, rather
Right.
than just like releasing the pressure.
Yeah.
If just to use the analogy, I think this like outbreak of like anti-Semitism is part of an uncontrolled explosion that just like lost. You know, the reality is the ADL along with APAC along with
Sure.
a bunch of like powerful Jewish American individuals and interests and publications um, did enforce a very strong pro-Israel line in American politics for a really long time, and to some extent still does. And that is no different than the standard anti-Semitic model where like Jews run everything, which like they don't. On the issue of Israel, they did have like veto power though.
There was, yeah, right. Especially, I mean, it's complicated. Um, there's always been, especially during the Cold War, I would say, probably maybe even stronger in the Republican Party. But there was um, a view basically that Israel was getting in the way of good relations with the Arab states, which was important for geopolitical reasons for the Cold War and oil stuff or whatever. It's very complicated. One thing that is kind of odd about uh, the current environment is that Americans are becoming especially maybe even in the conservative movement, both the conservative, like among conservatives and among liberals, are becoming more Israel skeptical at a time when that particular argument seems to be kind of fading. Like it used to be that one of the big arguments of the realist school against U.S. close relations with Israel is that, well, it's hurting us, with the Arab world. It's interfering with other stuff.
Yeah,
Now, like, to be honest, like most of the Arab world, at least a lot of the governments, seem to like Israel more than, certainly more than like,
yeah,
Saudi Arabia is allied with Israel against Iran. Like basically, so like uh, Egypt, I don't know that they would put it this way, but they are de facto allies with Israel against Hamas, say,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, things that even 10, 20, 30 years ago would have seemed inconceivable, like something out of a science fiction movie or something, right? It's like, what? Israel and Saudi Arabia are our allies?
Yeah.
And so that, that element of it has just kind of gone away. Um, but that hasn't really affected, like, that hasn't stopped, the hostility. So I don't know, some of it, I think, um, if you're older, I mean, if you're really old, you remember Israel in the 60s and 70s where it seemed like they were the underdog or whatever. And
Yes.
but even if you're
Like Biden.
right, yes, like Biden. But even if you're our age, you remember. I think you still can view the Israel Palestine conflict in the terms of Islamic terrorism or whatnot, right? Which is probably going to make you more sympathetic to Israel. Whereas, October 7th aside, horrific as that was, like, there's just a lot of stuff where it seems like, Israel is just, bombing everybody and doing all this stuff. And, there's all sorts of, like, TikTok videos of hospitals or whatever. So, I, surely that's got to be part of it.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think that the role that groups like the ADL uh, have played in trying to shut down conservative or right wing speech and individuals in various forms, that clearly has had a reaction. I think I just saw they did some research, just may have come out just this week, where they showed people ADL materials, and it was basically, I mean, it was just counterproductive. It's like people,
Yeah.
the ADL is like, oh, these people are all, anti-Semites or whatever. And people react by going like, whoa, you know, I don't know, like, maybe I don't like the ADL. Maybe I don't like Jews so much, if they're accusing everyone of being anti-Semites, irony aside.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
so so I think going back to Fuentes though, the issue here is, and I'm not like not a Fuentes completist, but I've watched a fair amount of his YouTubes and his clips every now and then. And we have friends that are like, yeah, he's actually really smart, and like sometimes. I mean, there was actually like this was maybe before this was like 2019 during the Goiper Wars when he was like sicking his followers on Charlie Kirk and his national tour. A friend of mine was like, actually, he's pretty smart, and I watched some of his stuff, and I'm like, I mean, he's a good entertainer,
yeah,
maybe. Obviously he can talk, he's engaging, and I know.
I think you cut out. Razib, did you mute yourself? Can you hear me? Um, yeah. Well, I'll just say to fill the dead air that he does. I mean, I don't know what his IQ is. He seems to be, actually, I would say, a fairly talented guy. I could see him in another world, you know,
Yeah,
having like becoming a Daily Wire pundit or whatever, and
yeah.
having a good career with that. And
Oh, for sure, for sure. He's.
whenever
I
I've
mean,
talked with like a Groiper, one of his supporters,
they're retarded.
they seem incredibly dumb. Yeah,
Yes,
and
and some people have said that he's. I guess what I'm saying is like, first of all, okay, he's not like offering a sophisticated. Well, I mean,
right.
let me just say someone who's been lumped in with him unfairly. Say like Kurt Mills, the editor of the American Conservative. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's expressed an anti-Zionist, I think, or a Israel skeptical line. This is a common thing at the American Conservative, going back to his foundation with Pat Buchanan. Uh, to my knowledge, I mean, Kurt Mills have never joked about a Holocaust. He doesn't, say like, oh, but they're a Jew. I mean, it's like,
Right, right.
so like Fuentes, like Nick Fuentes, on the Tucker show, he made a big deal about like, he's just skeptical of Israel and all the stuff the Jews won't let you talk about Israel,
Yeah.
bro. Like you're not talking just about Israel. Like I mean, you just talk about you were talking. I mean, I've seen Nick Fuentes like talk like incessantly about Jews and like, oh, they're criticizing me because they're a Jew, and
Right, right.
that's just not impressive. It's not like impressive. It's like, you know, I don't know. Like, yeah, the issue is, one thing I will say is, like, it is clearly true that someone's background um, affects their perspective on an issue, right?
Sure.
But when you reduce their viewpoint to their background, there is really no discussion to be had. Like, there's no point talking.
Right.
If you're just like, they're a Jew, therefore, it's like, okay, like, why are you talking to them? Like, it's dumb. The whole thing is dumb. And so Fuentes did that repeatedly. I don't know if he's doing it anymore, but he's really tight with Kanye. He still loves with Kanye. We know what Kanye thinks about those people.
Right.
This is, I don't know. I haven't really. I think you're right. He's got too much baggage there. He's like
Yeah.
named the Jew too much.
And can I just say, earlier we were talking about the Jewish anti-Semites or whatever, and I just want to just note another irony of this thing is that, like, the perhaps world's foremost white supremacist pundit is a Hispanic guy who wants a black guy to be president or something.
Yeah, he's a white Hispanic. He's a white Hispanic, is what we would say.
Right, yeah. Well, and then also the Kanye thing or whatever. So it's very, it's a weird world, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What I was gonna say though is,
Too much.
yeah, and also, like, he was claiming on the Tucker show that his best friend was Jewish. I don't know. The whole thing is like, it's a little
Yeah.
bit. It's a bit much of a circus. I mean, I think maybe one thing that I will say is, I mean, I don't. I think you're right. I think he has too much baggage. I think he's too good at his shtick. I don't think he can normalize. I mean, there's people like Matt Walsh who are coming from the other direction, and I think Matt Walsh's stuff on, like, trans and stuff was pretty good. But I will say this is Ramesh Ponnuru used this term once to describe Mark Stein. He's unpolished, and that basically means, like, Matt Walsh didn't go to college, Mark Stein didn't go to college,
Right. Yeah.
and, like, Nick did go to college for a year. He went to Boston University. He's clearly smart. I will say Matt Walsh kind of, like, treads into Fuentes' territory now and then, but he started from a base of just, like, pretty normal conservative, whatever, a normally conservative. Walsh could go all the way that way because he has expressed an interest in just being, like, totally neutral about Israel.
Mm-hmm.
To
Right.
you know to Ben Shapiro and the like, but I think Fuentes is different because he starts from the radical position as trying to edge his way into the mainstream, and he's not really disavowing anything. He's just not talking
Right.
about it. And
Right.
I don't think that's going to do it. I think it's. I think people have a measure of who he is. He's been around for 10 years, and he's also, in, like, some ways, he's very strange. Like, he's very ambiguous about his sexuality. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's weird. Like, he went on a date with a cat boy.
Right.
He's clearly not, like, he's been, like, caught on, hot mic. Like, it's not like he's gay himself. I don't think he is, actually, but, like, he doesn't care. He doesn't care if you're gay. He's not an anti-gay. Not that he should be. My only point is, like, he's just an interesting and, like, peculiar figure, and I don't think that he's fits into the box. He's a little bit like Tucker, although Tucker, Tucker started out from the right direction, having all the mainstream credibility and connections that he's slowly been burning away. you
Right.
know, but while becoming much more, like, bigger as a populist figure. But I mean, like Dinesh D'Souza, like, on Twitter, and I had Dinesh on my podcast, actually. Like, it was a 20-minute thing that I added on recently. I don't know if some of you guys might have heard of it, but Dinesh,
It was added on to what?
the Alexander Cortez podcast.
Oh, okay.
I actually added on Dinesh as the last 20 minutes.
He just, like, pops in, or it's a separate thing, or
It's a separate thing,
okay.
because, like, Dinesh and I were supposed to record for, like, 45 minutes, but there were some boomer technical issues. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, all right.
And, like, he doesn't have that much time. But my point is, Dinesh, like, is really pissed about Fuentes being on Tucker's show because he's like, you can't, like, engage with this person and play, that sort of stuff. Dinesh himself has, of late been a little bit on the populist side, making these documentaries that are kind of like conspiracy theorists or a little weird. But,
Hmm.
there's a line for him. Although Dinesh, like, this is unrelated to Nick, but, like, also I think, like, Dinesh has started to get a little taken aback by the anti Indian racism on Twitter because
Mm.
it's blowing at him as well. And he's like,
Right.
look, I've been around, which I think is fair. Like, Dinesh has been around since the early 1980s, you
Right.
know, being like mildly racist, No, I'm just joking. That was the accusation. I'm not
Right.
saying that
Yes.
it's
Yes.
true.
Yes. That's right.
But you know, um, I think Nick is like too far. Even for I know they're the youth. They like him, but like as you said, a lot of the grapers on the whole are just dumb. They're not like the smart. They're not the smart ones.
Yeah.
So
Uh, yeah, I mean the interesting thing, I think he probably is too far, but the interesting thing to me is that it's not even like he's holding down the space by himself because he's out there, but then you've also got Candace Owens who is out there who started out at the Daily Wire
I think she's schizo though.
normal. Well, that's quite possible. Um,
I mean, if she wasn't attractive and rich,
Right.
I
But
think
I mean,
like
she's
someone would
out
have committed
in
to her.
some ways. She's like further out now. Like I think Nick is like denounced various theories of hers.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, she's like even further out there about like Israel founded by pedophiles and
Yeah.
you know LBJ was Jewish. Secretly, Stalin was Jewish. Everybody was Jewish. Um, and so there's that, and then Tucker has not explicitly gone anywhere near like that, but he has. I mean, he's anti-Israel, which is fine. That's not a. But there's various things that he said that people have interpreted as being like anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic dog whistles. With varying degrees of plausibility. So I don't know. I mean, there's clearly it seems. And by the way, I should say, I was looking the other day, and I think I was looking at the top, the top podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Not of any particular category, but like of all time. And I think I forget exactly, but like number one is Rogan,
Yeah.
but also in the top, like Candace and Tucker are both in the top five, and I forget who the other ones are, but they're like I don't think they're political or they're like lifestyle type stuff or something. But anyway, so I mean, like that's a lot of people listening to this, to this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So clearly, and obviously, the fact that you listen to Candace Owens or Nick Fuentes' podcast does not mean that you endorse all of their theories. In fact, I'm sure a lot of people. I mean, I do this myself. I enjoy a good conspiracy podcast where the host is saying all this crazy stuff that I don't think is halfway plausible. But there are also, it would seem, a lot of people who at least buy into some of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as I say, we shall see. I mean, if we know that Nick will have made it if he's on Ross Douthat's podcast or
Right.
on Rod Ross's show in the.
I think the progression goes Greenwald, Glenn Greenwald, Red Scare, Tucker, Rogan, Ross Douthat.
Okay, so we got to go here.
My prediction, yeah.
All right, I guess the next thing we should talk about is behind the paywall, Helen Andrews' Peace and Compact.
Yes, talking about the Jews was not hot enough for an episode, so now we're going to talk about the WQ.
The Great Feminization. The Great Feminization.